So, when you think of ancient Persia and Greece, what comes to mind? Probably war, right? Marathon, Thermopylae, Alexander the Great, this whole epic clash of civilizations. But what if I told you that's only half the story? Turns out there's this fascinating case of cultural fusion, a place where these two massive rivals didn't just fight, they actually collaborated and created something completely new.
All right, so let's set the scene here. The history books, well, they usually paint a pretty black and white picture. Over here, you've got the huge, powerful Achaemenid Persian Empire. And over there, you've got the fiercely independent Greek city-states. For centuries, they were framed as the ultimate rivals, like oil and water. And yeah, that story of constant conflict is really powerful. But is it the whole truth? What happened after the big famous wars? What was going on in the places where these two worlds didn't just clash, but actually had to live next to each other day in and day out? And let's be clear, these were two very different cultures. Each had its own unique traditions, its own way of building an army, its own whole identity. They really were coming from two completely different places when it came to, well, everything. How to see the world, how to organize a society, even how to fight a war. The source material we're looking at today describes them as, and I quote, apparently irreconcilable traditions. And that one little word right there, apparently, that's the key to this entire explainer. It's this little hint that maybe, just maybe, they weren't so impossible to reconcile after all. So where did all this happen? Where did this unexpected mashup actually take place? Well, it wasn't in the famous capitals like Athens or Persepolis. Nope. It was in the land stuck right in the middle, in a region that basically became this incredible, unique laboratory for history. We're talking about a place called Eastern Anatolia, which is in modern-day Turkey. See, after Alexander the Great came through and just smashed the old Persian Empire, this whole area turned into a cultural crossroads. It was a total melting pot of Persian and Greek ideas and people. So once Alexander's empire started to fragment, all these new local dynasties started popping up. You had the Mithridatids in a place called Pontus, the Ariarathids in Cappadocia, the Orontids in Commagene, you get the idea. And all of them, every single one, was staring down the exact same massive problem. And that problem was, how do you rule? How do you make people believe you're the legitimate king? Think about it. Your people have these deep, deep Persian roots. But the new cool language of power, of prestige, of making money, that's all Greek now. So what do? Do you act like a Persian king or a Greek one? Who are you even trying to impress here? And this wasn't some, quick fix they needed. This was a long-term problem. These kingdoms had to figure out a way to make this work for centuries. The first ones popped up around 330 BC, and the last one managed to hang on all the way until 72 AD. That's when the Romans finally came in and swallowed them up. So the big question is, what was their solution? What was their brilliant answer to this huge political and cultural puzzle? Honestly, this is the absolute core of what makes this whole period so incredibly fascinating. Well, here's the kicker. They just refused to choose. Simple as that. Instead of picking a side, picking one identity, they decided, you know what? We're going to be both. We're going to be Persian and Greek at the exact same time. They literally created a new hybrid crown. And it all came down to a really clever trick of branding, of how they justified their right to rule. See, in the Persian tradition, the king ruled by something called divine consent. Basically, the big god Ahura Mazda had chosen him. But the Greek way was all about divine descent, claiming you were literally descended from gods or mythical heroes. So what do these new kings do? They just did both. They'd say, hey, we're descended from Persian royalty and from Greek legends. It was an absolute political masterstroke. And this brilliant best of both worlds strategy wasn't just for, political legitimacy and making up fancy family trees. Nope. They took that exact same logic and applied it to one of the most powerful forces in any society, religion. There's actually a word for this, a technical term. It's called syncretism. It just means the merging of different beliefs, cultures, or even gods. And let me tell you, these kingdoms became absolute masters of it. Okay, here's a perfect example of how they did it. They took the head honcho of the Greek gods, Zeus, and they took Aramestes, which was the Greek name for the chief Persian god Ahura Mazda, and they just smushed them together. They created this new hybrid supergod, Zeus Ramestes. That way, both their Greek and their Persian subjects could worship him together. Genius, right?
So when you kind of zoom out and look at the big picture, what these rulers actually created was a very deliberate, very effective state policy of, well, for lack of a better term, multiculturalism. An ancient version of it anyway. This whole idea of fusion became their entire playbook for how to run a country. It wasn't just about myths and gods, it touched every single part of the government. Their armies, a mix of Macedonian and Persian-style troops. Their bureaucracy, a blend of different administrative traditions. They were strategically picking and choosing the best parts from both worlds to build something new, and frankly, stronger.
And you know what? It totally worked. The source we're drawing from concludes that this cultural intersection created a new, interesting, and robust tradition. And that word right there, robust, that's the one to focus on. This wasn't some flimsy, fragile compromise. It was a strong, resilient identity that managed to last for generations.
So, at the end of the day, this was not some historical accident. It was a sophisticated strategy for pure survival and power. By embracing both heritages, these kings got everybody on board. They maximized buy-in from all their subjects, which in turn minimized the risk of someone trying to overthrow them. It created this incredibly stable foundation that just allowed their dynasties to last. Okay, so why should we care? Why does this story, from a pretty small corner of the ancient world, still matter today? What's the big takeaway from this whole Persian-Greek remix? Well, for one, just think about how long it lasted. We're talking over 400 years. This unique hybrid culture didn't just survive, it thrived for over 4 centuries, navigating this really chaotic period between Alexander's empire falling apart and the Roman Empire rising. I mean, that alone tells you how successful it was. But I think more importantly, it kind of forces us to rethink that simple story we started with, the one that's all about conflict. The relationship between the Greek and Persian worlds was so much more than just war. It was also about trade, about exchange, about adapting to new ideas, and yeah, even about collaboration. It was messy, it was complicated, and honestly, it's way more interesting than just a story about battles. And that really leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other great rivalries in history are actually hiding these deeper, more complicated stories? Stories of fusion, of creativity, of two sides coming together to make something new, if we just take the time to look for them.